On Midsummer's Eve, in the second watch of the night, Errol and his sons left on their journey to Tam Bluff Castle. Samson rode in his heavy iron cage on an oversized ox cart that Wagoner, the cart builder, had constructed especially for the trip. Errol and Brennus rode ahead of the oxen while Maynard, Jasper, Percy, and Aidan rode one at each corner of the cart like a troop of bodyguards to the great alligator. The sandy river road shone like a white ribbon beneath the round midsummer's moon. It was easy going in the cool of the night, and there was hardly a hill all the way to Tam Bluff. But still they had made slow progress, the team of oxen plodding along at its deliberate pace. Aidan nodded his saddle, lulled by the rhythmic creaking of the cartwheels. The little village of Huston Green, 2 leagues from Longleaf, was still asleep when the Errolsons inched through. A small dog yapped a few sharp barks at the strangers, but he beat a hasty retreat when Samson raised his head to investigate, and they heard no more from the little dog. Aidan smiled to think of the villagers, unaware of the terrifying beasts that crept only feet away from their beds where they slept so snugly. They were more than halfway to Tam Bluff when the first pink rays of dawn glimmered in the east. By mid-morning, they were in the sight of the castle's honey-brown parapets. Tam Bluff Castle was situated on a high sandstone bluff overlooking the River Tam. The sandstone from which the castle was built came from just across the river, and, like the bluff stone, was a rich honey color. Between brown and gold, the exact match between the masonry and the surrounding bedrock gave the impression that the castle hadn't been built on the bluff but carved from it. Tam Bluff Castle was nestled in a U-shaped bend where the river bulged eastward to wind around the sandstone promontory. So the castle had deep river on 3 sides. Along the fourth side, which bordered the city of Tam Bluff, the king had dug a wide moat, making an island of Tam Bluff Castle and providing a habitat for his alligators. The city of Tam Bluff, Cornwall's capital city, sat at the foot of the castle on the west bank of the southward flowing Tam. The city walls formed a nearly exact square mile. 3 walls were perfectly straight, 20 feet high, 1 mile long, and built at right angles to one another. The east wall followed the river. It served as a levee to protect the city from flooding. It also protected the city from enemies who would attack from the water. Each of the walls, except the east wall, which had a moat and a drawbridge, had a gatehouse in its exact center. It was nearly noon when the Errolsons reached Tam Bluff's south gate. South Porter, the old keeper of the gate, recognized them from a distance and came down the gatehouse steps to meet them. "Errol, old boy," he shouted, genuinely glad to see him. "I've been watching for you. What took you so long?" South Porter was a peasant, but he spoke to the nobleman with the ease and familiarity that had long been the custom among Cornwallers of any rank. "What's kept us, you say?" laughed Errol. Why don't you come see for yourself? Walking around to see what was in the ox cart, South Porter whistled with surprise and awe. "That's quite a beast for Darrow's moat?" "Yes, sir," answered Errol. "Aidan, my youngest son, captured him where the Tam runs along the edge of our lands." South Porter looked at Aidan with undisguised admiration and patted him on the shoulder. "You must be some kind of hunter." Aidan reddened. "Father gives me more credit than I deserve. I slipped a rope around his snout, so in a way you could say I caught him. But in the end, I did no more than my brothers." "Well, anyhow," answered South Porter, "he's a good one. King Darrow will be glad to have him." The old gatekeeper gripped 2 bars of the cage and leaned over toward the unmoving alligator. He spoke to the great monster the way one speaks to a puppy in a box. "Got a name, big fellow?" For an answer, Samson sprang to life and lunged at the gatekeeper with a terrifying roar. The clapping of his massive jaws sounded like 2 great planks being struck together. He seemed intent on dismembering the cheeky gatekeeper. South Porter lurched backwards and fell on the cobblestone pavement. His hat toppled from his head and rolled away. The gatekeeper quickly counted his fingers, then felt around on his face to make sure his nose was still there. His name's Samson, Aiden offered as he helped South Porter to his feet. Samson, you say? Well, Samson's manners is none too refined. Percy chuckled. Don't judge the poor fellow too harshly. He's had a hard day, and it's not even noon yet. South Porter looked dubiously in the alligator's direction. So, old friend, Errol broke in, have the 4 and 20 all arrived? I reckon so, South Porter answered, though I can only speak to the ones what come through the south gate. Of the 6 of you whose estates lie south of the river road, you're the last one to come through the gate. And our guests? Asked Errol. I assume they have arrived? The old gatekeeper's face darkened. The Perthens got here 3 days ago, and ever since, they've been strutting around Tam Bluff like a passel of roosters, just like they own the place. I don't like it one bit, Errol, and I don't care who knows it. No one quite knew what to say to this. South Porter pressed his point. I'm just a gatekeeper, Errol. You're a great nobleman. So maybe you could help me understand. How are we all of a sudden friends with these folks? Errol tried to formulate an answer, but before he got a chance to speak, South Porter began again. 4 times they've brought their armies to these city walls, and 4 times we've sent them running home like their pants were on fire. I took some pleasure in that. I don't care who knows it. 4 times the Perthens battering rams have pounded on this gate, my gate. My job was to pour boiling oil on their heads, but I would have gladly done it for free. I don't care who knows it. He paused for effect. But now will you open up the west gate and invite them to traipse right in? I don't understand this, Errol. At the council of the 4 and 20 a few weeks earlier, Errol had expressed these very same sentiments. He would have gladly told South Porter how heartily he agreed with him, but he held his tongue for fear of seeming disrespectful to King Darrow. But let me tell you this, friend, South Porter continued. If the Perthens had come to the south gate instead of the west gate, they'd still be standing right where you are, outside of my wall. Errol laughed. Spoken like a true Cornwalder. A Cornwalder true and free, the gatekeeper replied. His eyes glittered. Aiden was proud to know the old man. May you ever be so, said Errol. But now we must be off to the castle. I'll send a messenger ahead of you to tell gamekeeper Wendell that Samson is on his way. Thank you, friend, Errol answered. He knows to expect us. He'll be mighty proud to get such a beast, and I'll be just as proud to see him go. I don't care who knows it. Darrow's castle was only a half-mile from the south gate, but it was no small feat to maneuver the big ox cart through the narrow, crowded lanes of the capital city. Down every street, the busy throng parted before them and stared in awe at the monstrous alligator. An 18-foot alligator wasn't something Cornwalders saw every day, even in the big city. Boys and girls clambered up the thatched roofs by wayside houses or hung from the signs in front of the market stalls, the better to get a look at Samson. The onlookers peppered the Errolsons with questions. Where'd you find such a monster? Has he ever eaten anybody? What are you going to do with him? A butcher leaned on the counter in front of his stall, offered to buy the great reptile. Must be 150 pounds of meat in that tail, he remarked. But when Percy made as if to open the cage, the butcher quickly retracted his offer. He retracted his whole person, in fact, vaulting over the counter and clattering the shutters down behind him in a single rapid motion. And his brothers couldn't help but strut a little to see that their Samson was causing such a sensation in the city. Father, too, was visibly proud of his sons, especially of Aiden. He knew that all 5 had done their part in capturing Samson, but he also knew that without Aiden's initiative and resourcefulness, none of them would have had the chance to test their strength and their wits against this great beast. By the time the Arrowsons reached Tam Bluff Castle, they were followed by an army of young Tam Bluffers, messenger boys, shop girls, and apprentices of all sorts who dropped what they were doing to watch the fun. But when the ox cart finally began creaking up the ramp that led to the drawbridge landing, the followers fell away. 2 guards on the near side of the drawbridge signaled to 2 guards on the battlements above the gatehouse. The massive drawbridge began to jerk downward a foot at a time. The guards wore the dress uniforms of Darrow's royal guard. Over a coat of chain mail hung a loosely fitting silk tunic of royal blue, emblazoned with the golden boar, the emblem of the house of Darrow. The tunic was cinched with a leather belt, from which hung a scabbard and sword. The guards' round helmets were made of burnished steel and were embellished with an egret's plume, dyed to match the golden boar. As the drawbridge bumped its way down, Aiden peered over the low wall into the moat below. A tangle of large alligators wallowed and writhed over one another, but none was as big as Samson. Father is right, Aiden thought. Samson will have plenty of alligators to boss. He could see that the floor of the moat was sand rather than stone. Its gentle slope created a sandy beach where the alligators could sun themselves. There were also a number of sandbars and logs, which the larger animals had reserved for themselves. Aiden tried to guess which spot Samson would stake out when he was released into the moat. One of the alligators in the moat snapped its jaws in Aiden's direction. Aiden flinched involuntarily. The guard standing near him smiled and winked. "Just be glad you aren't the one who has to clean that place out," he whispered. The bridge finally dropped into place. At the far end, just inside the castle wall, waited Wendell, the royal gamekeeper. He was a red-faced, blustering man who always smelled like campfires. Aiden knew him from his many hunting trips to Longleaf. "Welcome, welcome," he boomed. "Glad you are here. I'll take this big fellow off your hands. Samson, isn't it? And get him ready." Now Wendell addressed Samson directly. "You're as big as they said. Come along now. King Darrow's going to be glad to see you. He's got big plans for you." And with that, Samson was wheeled away. Hostlers led the oxen away to the stables, and the steward showed Errol and his sons to their apartments. There they rested until sundown, when the treaty feast was set to begin.